Hello everyone, my name is Colin McIsaac. Today we're going to be looking at Kate Thornton's article, Leading Through COVID-19, New Zealand's Secondary Principals Describe Their Reality. A little bit about the article. COVID-19 closed schools in New Zealand for 7 to 9 weeks. Principals faced multiple challenges and had to adapt their leadership approaches. The article presents perspectives of 18 secondary principals regarding their leadership practices over the lockdown and explores challenges and opportunities that arose. The article aims to contribute to our understanding of school leadership in times of crisis. New Zealand had a 4-level alert system. The first level was closing the border and preparing for transmission of the virus. Level 2 was reducing gatherings and introducing physical distancing. Level 3 was staying in household bubbles and working from home if possible. Schools would stay open though for essential workers' children, but in Level 4 a national lockdown was implemented with only essential businesses staying open. And in this phase, the schools were completely shut down. The definition of a crisis is an urgent situation that requires immediate and decisive action by the organization, particularly the leaders of that organization. So we're going to look at 3 phases of crisis response today: the crisis phase, the adaptation phase, and the opportunity phase. We're going to focus with 3 leadership capabilities, empathy being the first one. It's so important to be able to feel what it's like to be in someone else's shoes during a time of crisis. Communication being second, and communication is the key attribute through which a leader can provide direction, certainty, and optimism during a time of crisis. And adapting and capitalizing on opportunities that a crisis creates to make changes is so important too. Leaders need to be able to adapt and be flexible, and in doing so can both learn during and after the crisis. Main components in the crisis phase. The first is addressing challenges. So principals are ensuring readiness for teaching online by ensuring that students had access to devices and that teaching staff felt prepared and supported. Staff capacity was an issue for principals in this study, as well as student safety and well-being, and the uncertainty of how long schools would be closed for. Some principals were relieved when Phase 4 shut the schools down because their staff were worried coming into work in levels 2 and 3. The second component of the crisis phase is prioritizing well-being. All principals in the study demonstrated empathy for both students and staff members. Principals expressed major fears for their poorer families and the students with neglect and trauma issues. Principals also mentioned that they worked with community partners to ensure that those students were kept safe and fed. The principals also expressed empathy and support for staff members who are vulnerable themselves or looking after somebody who was. The adaptation phase, so communicating. Frequent and clear communication with students, their parents, staff, and colleagues from other schools was seen as an important crisis leadership strategy by all principals in the study. All traditional lines of communication were kept open, with many principals trying to connect to their school community in new ways because they knew a one-size-fits-all approach would not be effective in passing information to all stakeholders. And principals valued networking with each other so they could share ideas and resources and possible feelings of isolation. Checking in. Principals ensured that they were connecting regularly with students, staff, and families. While some traditional means of communication such as email and online platforms were used, many schools chose to connect more personally with their students, especially if there are concerns about their well-being. Many contacted students by phone. Feedback was gathered from students, staff, and families on communication and online learning, which was used to modify approaches that were taken. Seems like a very smart idea. And increased contact and communication led to stronger relationships between families and the school. Distributing leadership. While there were times that the principals had to make quick decisions on their own, most of them expressed how they had drawn on the strengths and skills of others during the lockdown. Several principals who fostered a culture of distributive leadership in their schools were pleasantly surprised about how the trust placed in their staff played out. Several of the principals commented on how they wanted to build on this distribution of leadership going forward. The opportunity phase. Focused reflection. So only 2 of the participating principals mentioned collaborative opportunities to engage in focused reflection. Principals acknowledged that the challenge of finding time to reflect was a big issue. Taking opportunities. One positive aspect of the lockdown was enhancements made in online learning that could be carried forward. Another was the confidence and competence of teachers in using digital technology. And over half the principals articulated plans for offering senior students more flexibility in their learning moving forward. So in conclusion, here are some important takeaways from the article. It's important to prepare for a crisis by detecting signals and responding appropriately. It's important to demonstrate empathy and prioritize the well-being of all stakeholders. Communicating frequently and effectively using a range of media is very important. Leading collaboratively by involving others in leadership and taking a community leadership role, and taking opportunities to learn at all stages of the crisis. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Here are some reflection questions that will hopefully guide our discussion this week. I look forward to it.